Hi everyone, welcome back to the Shards Pearls podcast. And this week we're going to be discussing how yarn has no color. Last week we discussed yarn has no age. So stay tuned as we deep dive into this subject. Hi everyone and welcome back. Last week we discussed yarn and knitting and fiber arts has no age. Now this week, since it's Black History Month, I figure we go ahead and talk about the fact that yarn has no color. And not literally the yarn itself, but like the interest in the fiber arts community and anything pertaining to yarn. It's not for any specific race. Let me put that out there right now. It's not for any specific race. I've heard many times before that it was just for, I'm going to go back to for a minute, the old ladies, but to be specific, older white ladies to be exact. I've also personally been made fun of for not only being a person in their 30s who's knitting, but also being Black or being a person of color in knitting. Therefore, a lot of times I would avoid knitting in public so that way I didn't draw attention to myself, or people wouldn't ask questions, or people wouldn't look at me strange, or so I wouldn't get those kind of comments. However, as I've learned to stand up for myself and be proud of what I'm doing and enjoy what I'm doing, those things don't matter to me anymore. However, even though I've learned to combat, can't talk today. Even though I've learned to combat those kind of comments and ways of thinking from other people, they still have not gone away, and they're still very much prevalent in other people's lives. I've not only heard these things said to myself, I've heard them said to many other people as well. I've heard them said by other fellow people of color. So I wanted to get that out there today, that yarn and the fiber arts, no matter whether you knit, crochet, spin, you know the drill. Whatever fiber arts you do, it isn't just for one person or one person of a certain age bracket or a person of a certain color. It's for everybody. In the next segment, we're going to go a little bit further with it. So stay tuned. Now, I know that, at least from my research, there isn't an exact pinpoint of when yarn and knitting came about and to what specific country or continent. Though they have, if you Google this or like do your own research, you will find that there is some sort of yarn, some sort of knitting across many different continents, from China to Egypt. I used to think personally that most of the yarn and knitting originated in Europe, somewhere in Europe. And as I started doing my research and got more like into learning about the history of yarn and knitting and different types of fibers, knitting's been around for a pretty long time, and it's not just pinned down to one specific race. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. And even in modern day, I want to say, I guess I'll just leave it as modern day. There is still countries around the world who participate in fiber arts. Japan, they have like the Amagarubi. I know I just pronounced that wrong, but I know many of you know what I'm talking about, those little crocheted animals. But not even just the amigurumi, but they have yarn in general. They like to knit. You've got the South Americans who use yarn for weaving, knitting, that comes from alpacas and many other animals. You've got, even if you look right here in modern day America, I think is a good example, since America tends to be not just one specific race. We tend to be a melting pot, and even more so in different parts of the country, such as New York or places like that. You'll see people who knit, crochet, spin, whatever, of all nationalities, all races, all ethnicities, all ages, all styles and personalities. So yarn isn't just for one type of person. Yarn, like, it doesn't have to be your stereotypical old lady itchy wool sweaters. It could be a bathing suit cover up. It could be funky colored granny squares. It could be anything. It could be a sweater that's Harry Potter themed. You name it. There's a type of theme, yarn, color, whatever, for just about anybody you can think of if they're interested in yarn and fiber arts. So, yarn itself, again, has no color. In the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about yarn specifically in the Black community, so stay tuned. In this part of the episode, I want to talk about knitting in the Black community, as I said previously. I felt it was important to talk about this one because I wanted to do something for Black History Month, as well as many other reasons, such as, for one, I am a Black knitter myself, a knitter of color, a knitter, crocheter, yarn spinner, yarn dyer of color, as well as I listen and follow a lot of other Black fiber artists or Black people who knit on different social media, such as Instagram and YouTube. Like, I follow Gigi Made It. I follow the Quirky Monday podcast. I follow, I think it was Hey Brownberry. I haven't watched her stuff in a while. I like watching I believe the Drunken Knitter on YouTube. Yeah, so there's so many different Black people who knit. I know some in real life, such as one of my friends. She, like, I mean, oh my gosh, she's a knitting machine. Shout out to Kelly. Wow. If you go to the yarn shop, you'll find many Black knitters and crocheters there. Also in Baltimore, like where I am, you'll definitely find a lot of Black people who are interested in yarn here as well. You also have a local yarn dyer that has a brick and mortar store, Neighborhood Fibers. So yeah, it's endless. Also, when I really stopped to think about it, I mean, at first, just many years ago, as well as just kind of glazing over the topic itself, I honestly thought, like, what do Black people need yarn for? What do we use it for? Do we actually use yarn? And when I really started getting more into the fiber arts community, and also looking at our creations that we make, and also finding more podcasters and YouTubers and content creators who were black who were making stuff out of yarn, I said, wow, yarn really is prevalent in the black community more than I realized. So I was in awe, and just I found it amazing. We use yarn and knitting and crocheting, everything from like your typical stuff like sweaters and shawls, um, and garments, to things like head wraps, and to braid into our hair, and making locks, and so many other things. That and those just popped into my head when I started listing some of those things like right now, mainly because I feel like those things are like, I wouldn't say they're specific to us, but those would be one of the big things that you would see a black person use yarn for. I do it myself, so that's part of why I mentioned it. Like even like the hair wraps, like some people use fairy floss, or like not fairy floss, what is that stuff called? The stuff the string you use for cross stitching, they use that for hair wraps. But I recently found people who actually take yarn, and this is what made me try this myself, and actually wrap their hair with it. So I thought that was kind of cool. Um, yeah, like even those like really oversized beanies that you see, yarn, crocheting, just amazing. Um, Also, a lot of black people have and are coming out with their own lines of yarn. There are many yarn dyers I've seen out there who've done pretty well for themselves. Like again, I mentioned earlier, Neighborhood Fibers. You have, what is it, Lola Bean. Um, I believe it's called Essence of Autumn. I think I'm saying that right. But no, like if you type in black knitters or black yarn dyers or knitting in the black community on Instagram, you can find a lot of stuff to scroll through, and could potentially be there for a long time scrolling through this stuff, um, which is how much yarn is actually prevalent in the black community, and um, how many black creators there are on there, how much stuff to see. It's amazing, and I'm so happy for that. And it just keeps growing. So like, yeah, if you're black and you already are knitting or crocheting, or you would like to learn how to knit or crochet, I'd say go for it. Like again, yarn has no specific color. Like why not? Why not try it? There are plenty of other black people who are doing what you're doing. It took me a while to learn that too. I used to live in cities, or towns rather, that were predominantly just white people, or white and other races, but not really black. Um, so I would tend to feel like if I were to knit, I would be a total oddball, and it would make me stand out even more when I really wanted to blend in. But, but, I've learned to be okay with that, and not be afraid of what other people are going to think of me or my knitting, and just do what I do. Um, if somebody comes up to me and asks a question, let them ask me. What's the harm in it? As long as they're not being disrespectful, worst case scenario, I remove myself from the situation if I can. And I keep it pushing. But also within these towns, there were a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of, it was usually like the only one, like one yarn shop. And just being the only black person going to that one yarn shop in town, it really made me feel like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I here? Like, if I want to knit, I should like literally go home and knit. At least I don't have to get all these like stares for being, for one, the only black person here, and two, doing something that most people consider isn't being black, or people would say stop acting white. So yeah, a lot of times I used to avoid yarn shops in those areas for that reason. So even if nobody said anything, it was still the looks, the staring that I would feel when I went there. So it would make me uncomfortable. Wasn't until I got back to towns that were more diverse that I started to feel more comfortable being able to go to a yarn shop, or being able to be okay with being knitting while black, so to speak. I felt the most comfortable here in Baltimore because it's such a diverse city. Like, I feel like no matter what yarn shop, I feel like every yarn shop has its own personality. That's kind of an obvious statement. Every yarn shop owner has a different personality, and they bring that personality into their shop. Nothing wrong with that. However, I feel like here in Baltimore, I feel like the most comfortable I've been in a yarn shop ever. And I'm grateful to have lived in a city to be able to experience that. So that's one part of my experience in Baltimore I would not change. And I'm so grateful to be able to be around not only just other black knitters, but even people, non-black knitters, who it's not such a strange concept for me to be working with yarn and enjoying hanging out at a yarn shop. So that's my take in that area for us black knitting and yarn in the black community. Stay tuned for the next segment. In conclusion, everything I said, I think I've pretty much expressed everything that I wanted to talk about in this episode. I say, do you, as I always say, do what makes you happy. Don't worry about what other people say or think of you. If they're making you feel bad for doing what you're doing, don't be around those people. Like, be around people who allow you to thrive and flourish in what you're good at and what makes you happy, and not try to bring you down or make you feel ashamed or like you're not good enough or anything like that. Sorry, I took a drink of water. Yeah. So if you're black, be proud. Do your yarn, knit, crochet, whatever you do. If you're Asian, same thing. Native American, biracial, Latina, whatever you are, do you. Don't stop enjoying what you're enjoying just because somebody tells you you're the wrong color to be able to enjoy this thing. So that's my take on this. Also, happy Black History Month. And let me know in the comments what's your take on things and how do you feel about the topic. Until next time, I will talk to you guys later. Stay safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next episode, or talk to you in the next episode rather. Bye.